Hola amigos, ¿qué tal? Stuart here from Spain Speaks with a Spain news update, and Brussels is starting to tighten the screws, but more about that in just a moment. Firstly, a big thanks to all of the people that left comments on the last video. Lots of comments, lots of debate happening there as usual. Thanks to people that supported the channel through a donation. You can see your name here. Thanks to people that bought merchandise, and a big thanks to my patrons on Patreon for your support. Now, let's get into the news, and as I said, Brussels is starting to tighten the screws when it comes to that EU aid money. As we can see here, Brussels is now demanding that Spain lengthen the period for calculating pensions in exchange for European funds. Brussels has obliged Spain to increase the number of years of contributions used to calculate the amount of the pension. This is the demand proposed by the European Commission, EC, which Spain has accepted in exchange for the 70 billion euros in recovery funds. The measure is part of the operational agreement, a document of more than 300 pages that sets out the objectives to be achieved in order to comply with the reforms and investments committed in exchange for European subsidies. As can be read in the text made public on Wednesday, the EU capital sets a deadline of the end of 2022 for the entry into force of the adjustment of the calculation period, extending it for the calculation of the retirement pension. So, there we go, bad news for workers here in Spain when it comes to the state pension, as the government will need to lengthen the period for calculating pensions because of a Brussels demand, or there will be no cash. So the Brussels demands and the reforms that it is forcing Spain to make are starting to come to light, and it's not looking good. Now, Germany has also had a crack at Spain in recent days, and the German Council of Experts is questioning Spain's reforms and ability to implement funds. The Advisory Council of German government economists, popularly known as the Five Wise Men, has doubts about the Spanish government's ability to approve the structural reforms associated with the disbursement of EU funds, such as labour, tax and pension reforms, and its ability to implement them. The Spanish Recovery Plan announces structural reforms in 11 different policy areas, for example in public administration, the labour market or vocational training. Also a reform of the tax and pension systems. There are doubts about the feasibility of the reform projects, and above all about whether Spain will have the capacity in the near future to implement the funds that have been made available, warns the Council in its autumn report published on Wednesday. So the German Council of Economic Experts, aka the Five Wise Men, questioning the Spanish government's ability to implement European funds. So the Spanish government's haters are really starting to pile up. Now, with rising fuel costs and future tolls on all roads here in Spain in the near future, transport workers have had enough, and they have called a 3-day strike before Christmas due to government abandonment of the sector. The road transport sector employers have called a 3-day national strike due to the abandonment of the government. The National Road Transport Committee has explained that it is a protest against the serious economic situation that transport companies are going through and the lack of answers after years of negotiation. The stoppage of activity will begin at 12 midnight on the 20th of December and will last until 11:59 p.m. on the 22nd of December, that is 3 full days of mobilisation. Only a radical and urgent change on the part of the government and customers could avoid this conflict, they warned in a statement. So transport workers calling a strike 5 days before Christmas that will bring the country to its knees. Now, Brexit has apparently put an end to British dominance in the property market here in Spain for foreign buyers, and according to newspaper El Mundo, Germans have put an end to British hegemony in the housing market. Only Brexit could put an end to decades of British hegemony in the Spanish real estate market. It happened in the third quarter of this year when Germans overtook UK nationals for the first time when it came to buying a home somewhere in our country. German buyers accounted for 10.4% of buyers between June and September 2021, compared to 9.9% of British buyers. This has never happened before since the Association of Registrars has been compiling statistics on the subject. Experts point to one main reason, the divorce of London and the European Union. It has been noticed that as a result of Brexit, the British are not buying as much. Before they spent longer periods in Spain, and that boosted demand. But now their stays are limited to 1 month at most, and it is noticeable in the market, explains Jose Costa, spokesman for the National Federation of Real Estate Associations in the Valencian community. So there we go, the end of British hegemony in the housing market here in Spain, with the Germans now overtaking the British as the main foreign buyers of property in this country. So Brexit, you've done it again. Now, the final piece of news we'll look at today is the division that keeps on getting bigger between the left and the right side of politics here in Spain. And yesterday, the leader of the far-right party Vox, Santiago Abascal, responded to Pedro Sánchez on whether he has been vaccinated against COVID-19. "You look too thin," he said. Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez asked the leader of Vox, Santiago Abascal, in the plenary session of Congress on Wednesday whether he has received the vaccine against COVID-19 or not. "Have you been vaccinated? You don't have to say. You don't want to say. Of course, that's the problem," replied the President Pedro Sánchez against the leader of Vox. The leader of Vox responded to Pedro Sánchez's question on whether he has received the vaccine against the coronavirus in the following way: "I don't know if you are too thin. I don't know if you have some kind of infectious contagious disease, but you don't have to tell me anything about it." Abascal did not reveal whether he had received the vaccine or not. "I'm not going to answer that question," he said. So Prime Minister Sánchez yesterday accusing the leader of Vox, Mr. Abascal, of being an anti-vaxxer, and Mr. Abascal refusing to say whether he has been vaccinated or not. So it seems that the anti-vax movement here is also associated with the extreme right. Now let's have a look at some of the comments from previous videos. One here from Alex P. 30% youth unemployment. Learn English, learn to code. "I've worked at 3 tech companies in Andalusia, all English speaking as they always are. And I've met about 5 Spanish people with skill levels above that of an admin staff. Everyone else was from the other mix of European nations. All these educational resources are free online. There's no excuse of the opportunity not being there." Yeah, Alex, thanks for the comment, and referring to an article that we saw yesterday that Spain is the only country in the European Union, in fact one of only 2 countries in the OECD, with youth unemployment above 30%. And that could be a solution for a lot of young people. Learn to speak English well and learn to write code. And you're right, the internet is full of educational resources and there are no excuses nowadays. And I find it amazing that tech companies in Andalusia have to hire foreign workers because they can't get local talent. And remember that in some parts of Andalusia, youth unemployment is higher than 30%. One here from Kerry: "We are fortunate in Lanjarón. My drinking water comes from a spring and my oranges are full of melted snow from the sierras." In some ways, geography is history, and in other ways, it definitely isn't. Yeah, Kerry, thanks for the comment, and thanks for adding to the conversation about which part of Spain has the best drinking water. We saw in an article the other day that Burgos apparently has the best drinking water in Spain, and Palma de Mallorca has the worst. And down there in Granada, high-quality drinking water direct from the mountains. And I imagine that the water quality in Lanjarón is fantastic because there's a brand of bottled water from that region. One here from Rod: "Always informative videos. Thanks too much, mate. Surprised by all the cigarette butts on the beach. About 28% of Spain's population smokes, which is below world averages. It's about 30% in the US. Smoking is prohibited at many beaches here. Hope they use the machine to pick up that mess." Yeah, Rod, thanks for the comment, and referring to an article that we saw yesterday that some 1 million cigarette butts were found on a beach in Denia, Alicante. And you're right, let's hope that they didn't have to pick them up by hand. And when it comes to the official amount of people that smoke here in Spain, you mentioned there 28%. I don't know if that figure is correct, because by the amount of cigarette butts that I see scattered around Spanish streets, I get the impression that the figure's a lot higher. Or maybe it's because they don't know how to use ashtrays. And finally, one from Desert Preacher: "That is wrong. We call people on the left side of politics rojos, not comunistas. A bit of respect for the truth, please." Yeah, Desert Preacher, thanks for the comment, and referring to a comment that we saw yesterday from somebody that said that politics here in Spain is easy to understand because people on the right side of politics, known as fachas, and people on the left side of politics, known as comunistas, constantly insult each other, and that's all there is to it. And thanks for pointing out that they are not called comunistas, they are called rojos, and sorry for not respecting the truth. On that note, I'll wrap the video up. Questions and comments, please leave them in the section below. Debate the video out as you normally do. Give it a thumbs up if you liked it, thumbs down if you didn't. I'll see you in the next one. Hasta luego.